what I look at it, again, when I throw my, old owner's hat on, is every owner that you talk to, every owner that you work with has limited budgets,
Yep.
right? They have dollars that they need to spend wisely. But if we can find a way as an industry to leverage AI to do things more efficiently, if you can then help an owner do more with every dollar that they have, that's a massive, massive victory.
You're listening to the Building Better Futures podcast, where innovation meets inspiration. In each episode, host Eric Hurani journeys alongside notable thought leaders who are shaping the future, cultivating exceptional work cultures, and nurturing the next generation of trailblazers. We aim to spark inspiration by engaging in dialogue with leaders from groundbreaking companies, innovative projects, and exceptional teams. Our goal is to empower individuals to positively impact those around them and leave a lasting legacy of positive change in our communities and society at large. Let's dive in together and explore what it takes to build better futures, one conversation at a time.
Today, I'm excited to be joined by a good friend, Jaidev Sankar, AECOM's Transit Strategy and Growth Lead for the U.S. East and LATAM. And I hope you're taking advantage of the opportunities to go down to Latin America.
I need to do a better job of that, I'll be honest with you, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
I know it can be tough, but I always love how the regions kind of break out that way. Like ASCE does a similar thing. It's like, oh, the Northeast and the Caribbean. I'm like, someone that was a really good marketer because they decided, you know what? If I'm going to do the Northeast, I might as well do the Caribbean too.
Smart people, yes.
But that's really exciting. Thank you again for doing this. I'm really excited to hear your story. And before we jump in, we always like to start with some good news and gratitude. So, I'll just ask you: is there a personal or professional good news or gratitude you'd like to share with me in the audience?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about finding time for family. And what I'm grateful for is I have a family and a very cute dog that enjoys traveling because that's one of my passions is traveling. So really excited about an upcoming trip we have. We're actually heading out to Marrakesh in Spain.
Oh
So
wow,
can't wait to do that. I think it's a great opportunity for the kids to see other cultures and see other parts of the world. So really happy that my family allows me to indulge in my own passion, which is travel, and they've come to love it as well. So that's why we work, right? We work to do the things we love and love being with family and love seeing the world. So grateful for.
that is so nice to hear. Because Michelle and my wife's name is Michelle. Michelle and I are in a very similar situation, I guess. So, and I'll just my gratitude will be to her. Is we were talking about this the other day, and I'm like, we're not like materialistic. Like I don't need a lot of stuff, and I don't have a lot of stuff to be honest. But we love to travel, and we were talking about, we just celebrated our 4-year wedding anniversary,
Oh,
and so
congratulations.
I guess, but, like, then I'm in industry and people are like, "Oh, yeah, we're gonna come up on 35 years." I'm like, "All right, I better hide my face in this." But, we were celebrating that, and we were just talking about, like, well, what's the next 4 years? And both of us were like, we have young kids, so it's like, we wanna travel, but can we travel? And that, like, whole conversation is challenging, but you brought up Marrakesh, and so one of the trips that we will be taking, hopefully together, but if we can't find sitters, she will go alone, but her good friend is having, like, a milestone birthday, and they wanna go to, Morocco, and,
Oh, nice.
so that's gonna be, like, we're looking forward to that. My other gratitude, always to the guests. So I can only imagine how busy you are trying to run the East region, Latin America, and especially for like, one of the biggest in the game, AECOM. So that's really appreciative. I just really appreciate you taking the time out to do this, and I'm hoping we'll have a good conversation.
I appreciate you inviting me on. I know that from past guests, the feedback has been this has been a lot of fun. So looking forward to it.
I I try to keep it fun. We talk about this as a team also. Like we work really hard and we should, right? I'm a big believer, like I believe that as a person and hopefully like even as society, like our goal is to advance things to be better, and we can only do that if we work hard for it. But we gotta have fun while we're doing it. Otherwise it just becomes strenuous and that's not great. All right, cool. Well, I'll open up with you. Just give us some of your background. Like where did you grow up? Where'd you go to school? What got you into this crazy mess? Like does that happen?
That is a good question. I mean, I was native New Yorker, born and raised, born upstate, moved down to Brooklyn, and eventually found my way out to Long Island. And so I spent most of my childhood in Long Island in Nassau County. And very young, I mean, it's very cliche, right? For engineers, I love Lego. I love playing with Lego. That's like how I spent a lot of my time in the hot summer days and the cold winter days. And I think that just got me into like just building things and seeing how things fit together. But honestly, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be an architect. Like, I'm going to take that. I'm going to be an architect." And then when I hit high school and I started taking an architectural drawing class, I realized I couldn't draw. Like, I could put Lego pieces together, but I literally couldn't draw a straight line and I couldn't write in a way that people could read what I wrote. So I ended up taking an engineering class, a mechanical drawing class, and I kind of said, all right, this is really interesting. So I ended up applying to engineering school. I ended up going undergrad at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania and got my bachelor's of science and civil engineering from there. And then came out and actually was lucky, very lucky, coming out in the recession in the early 90s. Got a job at Spurgeon, a really great design firm based in St. Louis, but had a really robust practice in New York, and was able to start my career. And then part of what I also did was, as when I started working, I started going to get my master's degree. So I went to Columbia University to get my master's degree in civil engineering as well. I'm very lucky that they had a tuition reimbursement program because I made it pretty cheap. So couldn't pass that up. But that's really where it kind of started from. And when I was in college, again, I was thinking I would be a structural engineer, but focus on aerospace engineering. But what I found was I ended up taking a concrete design class and fell in love with concrete. Sounds crazy. I give credit to my professor, Professor Van Horn, who really sort of gave me that passion of what you can do with concrete. And so that's kind of I ended up being focusing on heavy civil programs and projects instead of aerospace engineering. So I kind of left that sort of aspiration away and then focused on civil. And when I got to Spurgeon, I got really lucky. I mean, I worked with some really great people. My very first job was the reconstruction of the Stamford station in Stamford, Connecticut, which is a Connecticut DOT station serviced by Amtrak and Metro North and Connecticut DOT. So a really interesting project. Learned, like, did my first designs there. Worked with a really amazing project manager, Lynn Bauman. And it's so important to work with people that you can look up to and learn from. And she was one of those people that I came across early in my career. But that kind of under on to heavy civil and underground projects where I got a chance to work on the Big Dig, the Central Artery Tunnel in Boston, transformative project, taking down an old elevated structure that separated the city from its waterfront. And then, that project has been much maligned, but in the end, it's an incredible transformation of that city. And I kind of got a passion for the underground space and then spent about 7 years there and then ended up, it was in late 90s and all of a sudden the tech boom was happening. And I found out about a company that was founded by a bunch of Harvard Business School graduates, but had someone that from the Preeny family that founded the company and decided to give that a shot. So I left traditional civil engineering and ended up going into the tech space. That was an incredible experience. It was a company focused on creating marketplaces and collaboration opportunities for engineering firms and contractors. So, so just an incredible opportunity to see how a company sort of gets started and to sort of be in that space at that time. It was like nothing more exciting and more exhilarating than being part of trying to build up an internet company in the late 90s. But what that taught me was really about how you can collaborate across that is a transferable skill. Like I did not program, I did not like I was not in the tech space. I was there helping them figure out how do engineers and contractors collaborate and work. Right. So I was helping them figure out how do you shape this product so that you can create something that is useful in the A&E space. And spent about 2 years there. As many companies got acquired a bunch of times. And then I was working in New York. They ended up moving to San Francisco for the headquarters. And then when they asked me to move, I was like, I'm not moving someplace more expensive than New York, which the only place at that time was San Francisco. So I decided to sort of say, thank you very much. I'm going to sort of move on. And then took some time off and did some incredible trips, including Australia and New Zealand with a friend of mine, and then found my way back into the consulting and in engineering industry. So I ended up joining CTE in 2001, Concert Townsend Bardine. Lifelong friends, a lot of friends I'm still friends with today. And that became an AECOM company eventually. And what ended up happening was I found my way onto the Second Avenue Subway project. And so that was something that I always wanted to work on, something that had always been talked about in New York. It was like a legend in New York. But I had told a friend of mine that once that project comes back to life, I want to be on that project. He was working at Dibsham Harris at the time and called me and said, hey, we just won the Second Avenue Subway. CT is on the team. And I went to my supervisor at CT, said, I want to be on that job. And that's how I ended up down on that job and spent almost 13 years on that project from 2002 started about 2014. And that was transformational for me. I mean, because I learned that was from concept design. MIPA was going on at that time. We took it to advanced design. We ended up going, finding packaging into 4 phases. And then phase one went into construction. And I got to spend about 7 years supporting the construction of the running tunnels, the 72nd Street Station Cavern, and the 86th Street Station Cavern. So, I mean, in terms of like once in a lifetime projects, I mean, that was it for me. I thought I had done some pretty cool stuff before that with the Big Dig of Tren Urbano in Puerto Rico, which was the first subway line in San Juan. But to be on the Second Avenue subway project at that time was really, it was quite an experience. And I probably learned more in that 12 years of my life than I've learned at any other point in any point in my life in my career. But then I ended up leaving AECOM and joining HNTB. And someone, Mike Sweeney, who you know well, brought me over there and asked me, so, I see, had an org chart and said, I see you over here in the whale group. And I looked at him and I said, I don't want to do that. He goes, what do you want to do? And I pointed to a blank place on the org chart saying, I want to do everything. I want to learn more about the business because I had been on projects my entire career up to that point. I wanted to know how the business worked. And he gave me that opportunity. And I did a variety of things at HNTV, including, getting involved in the government relations efforts, supporting strategic projects and programs. You got involved in some of the traffic use of LaGuardia. But what I did get involved with, which taught me a lot about how politics influences our business, is I got involved in the congestion pricing study and panel that at that point Governor Cuomo set up. And I knew nothing about tolling, but I was able to communicate the technical jargon with the stakeholders, with the politicians, with the people that need to understand how tolling could work and what it could mean to generating funding for transit in New York City. So that was an incredible experience, meeting a lot of local electeds, understanding what they're looking for, and how that shapes policy and how that ultimately affects the projects that we deliver. So incredible experience at HNTB. And then 2022 was when the IIJA bill passed. That was when Amtrak got their infusion of money, much, much, much needed money because they'd been on life support for the 50 years of their existence to that point with limited year-to-year funding, no predictability on funding. This finally gave Amtrak an opportunity to have predictable, meaningful funding so they could actually get the system back up at the state of repair, but also start to expand and improve the system as well. So they stood up a capital delivery program. A group within Amtrak was brand new, was something that the CEO at that time, Steve Runner, realized was necessary to be able to deliver once in a lifetime projects for Amtrak, really once in a lifetime projects for all of us, because they had never had that opportunity before. So Laura Mason was hired in, and then she stood up a group, and I ended up being hired under Laura as the first vice president of infrastructure project delivery. So that was an incredible opportunity for me because I'd never been on the owner side. And so having an opportunity to join the owner side and understand what keeps owners up at night, how do owners think about delivering projects, how does an organization see how they organize and how do they work, and then ultimately how do you make it better so that we can pivot ourselves and get Amtrak ready to deliver these major programs, which had never really had an opportunity to do before. So that was a really amazing experience. I learned so much working at Amtrak in that organization, helping to build the organization as well at the same time. As Laura would say, when I ask her a question, she goes, Jay, we're making this up as we go along. We get to decide how we want to do this. So that was a really amazing opportunity. And then after 3 years, stood up the team, got a bunch of projects launched, felt really good about sort of my time at Amtrak and decided for mostly personal reasons to then come back to the private sector. And then I rejoined AECOM in June of this year, 2025. Long-winded answer to your opening question, Eric, but I hope that was
No, it was
detail.
that was perfect. And we have some talking points here, and I might just throw them all out the window because there was so much you said there that I want to dissect, and I think like really get to the heart of like why I even wanted to do a show like this. So first, I'll just touch on something I had shared with you earlier, which is, very often I'll have like people I would consider friends on the show, and I'll hear this entire part of their life that I never heard of because it doesn't come up in your like networking conversations or even when you're out to lunch or coffee or any of that stuff. So I will start with I kind of knew your history from CTE on. So everything before that was really interesting to hear about. The first thing that popped into my mind, and it's not even related to this, but I was thinking, so a diehard Yankee fan in Boston, huh? What was that like
Yeah,
for a couple of years at the Big Dig?
so that was an interesting time. That's when the Red Sox hadn't won anything, so, it was
It
good
was a
to be a
lot
Yankee
easier.
fan at that
Yeah.
time. It was a lot easier. But, even Yankee fans, we have to be a bit generous with our time. We'll help Boston once in a
Yeah.
while. No, but it was, I was up there, like, recently not recently, so a couple years ago with my family, and I was trying to explain to them what was there. And it's funny, if you don't know what it was like, you don't really understand the transformation that that project sort of provided to that area of Boston. It is stunningly beautiful. The area where the with Central Artery was, with parks, outdoor bars, it is just incredible. But yeah, it is. I wore my Yankee hat once in a while up
Yeah.
there.
No, that was just kind of joking aside because what I wanted to get to was what you touched on there was I recently got my like wedge certification, so the waterfront edge design guidelines. And I love that opportunity for us as an industry to take advantage of where we can, like waterfront accessibility, right? For the public, for even for commercial use, right? Like there's good use of it. And there was a period in time where it wasn't as thought about. And so we
Right.
kind of wasted some of it, right? And there's a lot of revitalization projects going now and the Big Dig's a great example from way back when. Like you said, while it had its challenges today, it's not bad. It's great. You also threw in there very quietly almost that you helped in Puerto Rico with their first subway tunnel. So were you living in Puerto Rico at that time? And
I did spend a few months down there. It happened to be, ironically, they asked me to, when I was in Spurgeon, they asked me to go down there, and it was the summer of '98, I believe it was, and I was almost done with a master's degree at Columbia, and so they allowed me to spend the summer down in Puerto Rico. Not bad, right? Worst places to be. But then come back when my last semester started, and then I supported the project from New York. But I did spend a few months down in Puerto Rico, which working with the contractor, working with the local designer in their office, and that was a design build project, and that was a real eye opening experience for me to understand how design build projects get phased, what the contractor's looking for, and then how you're designing as you're going as a young engineer, because I was a young engineer at that point, no longer. It was a really incredible experience for me. But yeah, I did get an opportunity to spend some time on the island. Beautiful.
that is cool. And what I love, and I'm hearing this like kind of as a theme, is like you say yes to mega projects and you like throw yourselves into them and you seem to learn a lot. And you mentioned your time with CT, so I said like that I knew about a little bit. And what I think is amazing about CTE is to this day, no matter what company those people are at, they still talk about how the culture at CTE was so great. And like culture is something we talk a lot about, like both internally, but I also talk about it externally. And like that would be, my goal in a lot of ways is like that, the industry at times can be transient, right? Like people will work for different firms at different parts of their career, and that's not bad but that people would remember, like, that time with that firm as, like, "Hey, that really changed, like, who I am, and I love those people because it was about the people there," like, it was about the people and the projects we worked on.
Yep, and Liam Dalton was there too, and he's one of my mentors as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, I know there's a bunch of folks I think I mistakenly ended up at, like, the CT golf outing 2 years ago, so I saw a bunch.
Mistakenly, okay. Yeah, no, it's a really tight group, and we stay connected to this day. We actually just had Thanksgiving lunch, a bunch of us,
That's
last week.
awesome. I love that. And what that leads me into is kind of something I actually want to talk about because I think it'd be great for the next generation of like leaders to understand this and not even just like early or emerging professional, but even mid-career and later career professionals. Like so the conversation you had with Mike, and we had Mike on as a guest. Mike's such a great guy, and I really I have a lot of respect and admiration for him. And I love that it sounds like, walked in and were like, "Hey, this is what I wanna do." And sometimes as the person on the other side of the table as well, for him to be like, "Okay, and I trust you to do that," right? So, tell us a little bit about, like, what is that conversation like, and how does someone approach that conversation maybe if they wanna have that in their current role with the supervisor, like, a boss. I don't love the word boss, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, look, with Mike, obviously, I've known Mike for a long time. It was easier for me because I know him. But I mean, but the larger point I think you're getting at is you should not be afraid to tell someone what you want, right? Because ultimately, that's the person who's hiring you wants to make sure they're hiring for the right role, that fits what you want to do. Because ultimately, it has to work for both parties, right? So being honest and open about what you're looking to do, what you'd like to do, and what you don't want to do, right? I think is really important because the worst thing that can happen is someone takes a job on, and really does a job they don't want to do or isn't qualified for, gets there and then fails because that means that's a problem for both the individual, but it's also a problem for the employer. So I think he appreciated the honesty because if I just said yes to what he asked me to do, I wouldn't have been happy, right? And ultimately, that would have reflected in what I do and how I bring myself to work every single day. Then Mike wouldn't be happy, or even the people I'm working with, right, won't be happy. So I think it was hard for me to say that because I'm typically reserved from that perspective. But I felt it was important if I'm gonna have an honest conversation about an opportunity, I should articulate what the opportunity is I want. I'm lucky that he said yes, that they had an opportunity that he said I can do that. And we crafted something, and it was something I think provided benefit for him, but it also for me, I learned so much because I got exposed to so many different parts of the business that I had never been exposed to previously, just having been on projects up to that point. So it was, I look back on the conversation to this day, and it was a really, really, I was nervous, but I'm happy the way it turned.
That's awesome. And you said you're lucky he said yes. And I don't want to speak for Mike, obviously, but as someone who's been in like similar situations and other conversations and like maybe sometimes on the same side that Mike was on, like I would say I'm thankful for that person to bring this to me and say they want to do it and like and then go out and like, kick butt and like really deliver. There's nothing better than that. So I think both sides of that conversation, I'm sure Mike looks back and is like, I'm really glad I let Jake do that because that was awesome for me. And then, I said I wanted to touch on a couple of different topics there. You talked about your time with the tech firm. Like, I had no idea about that. And I don't know, is that company like still involved or operational or,
It's
I know
been
they get
bought
sold
out.
off and
Yeah,
yeah,
it got bought out so many times. It ended up just being an online collaboration tool, and I think eventually they just kind of went away. I think
yeah.
got bought up in pieces of it, but so no, Eric, I'm still working, so I didn't cash my stock out. But it was again, just from an experience point of view, it was incredibly exciting. Got to travel to San Francisco, but again, it got me. I had at that point only dealt with contractors really on the design build project in Puerto Rico. But in that role I was in there, we were meeting with all of the major contractors about how do they work, how do they procure, how do they collaborate. So from that perspective, it actually kept me sort of sharp on our industry. And I look back on some of that experience, and I've borrowed from those conversations to this day. It gave me a really different perspective on our industry, even in tech. It was really cool, actually.
I love perspective in all things, right? And I try to impress that on like the team, any level, right? From bottom up, right? Many times people look to me or probably to you as like, well, what's the answer? And I look at them and I'm like, you know this better than I do. You tell like what is the you have perspective on this that I do not have. And they sometimes don't see it. And I can tell from the way you told the story, like, whether or not it was intentional and sounds like it was, but you've been very conscious about like, I need to see every aspect of something to then be able to see the whole picture, right? Like the big picture vision. And so touching on your role with the technology and kind of like we'll call it parallel path here, but what do you see as like innovations or technological improvements like in what we're doing today, right? Like large rail program delivery, what are you seeing? Because in the Puerto Rico job, it sounds like you said that was design build in like the mid 90s, right? Like
Yes.
something that we are just now getting around to. Well, and probably now we could say it's been around for a little while, right? But we were a little bit, late to the game, right? With design build here in New York. Like, are you seeing other technology or even delivery methods in other parts of the country or other parts of the world that are exciting or things we should look at or be aware of?
So it's funny. This sounds counterintuitive, but Amtrak I think is really leaned into different ways of looking at project delivery, and I credit Laura and the team there for sort of bringing a different approach than the traditional design build bid build approach. The rest of the world, in particular Australia and the UK, really set this sort of lead on alternative delivery, collaborative contracting. Like every time I turn around, there's a new term, and they're using a different way of delivering projects. I think in general, right, collaborative delivery is right. If you can come up with a way that you can have the designer and the contractor and the owner together to figure out what's the right approach to the project, set realistic budgets and schedules, and really understand the scope, what's needed, what is nice to have, and then sort of what's been gold plating. I think oftentimes those that collaboration is inhibited by contracts and also inhibited by the maturity of an agency. What I mean by that is, can the agency actually let some of that control go and be comfortable that they'll get a product they can operate and maintain? Because ultimately, it's about what at the end of the day, these agencies have to live with whatever gets built. So they have to be able to operate and maintain safely, right? In particular, when you think about rail and transit, right? But what I like about what Amtrak did was they understood where the organization was. They understood where their funding was what their funding situation was, and they started to try CMAR, right? CMAR, it's almost like design build, but it's a bit like lighter than design build because
Yeah.
the owner still retains the design and design control, but you bring the contractor in to be able to work with the design team and the owner to then finish, let's say, from 30 or from 60, take it to 100. And then you start to get the builder's input, means and methods, their phasing and staging plans, and you start to craft a more realistic budget and schedule. Because ultimately, owners struggle with that, right? How many projects have you been on where the owner has a budget and schedule, but in the reality, the market's telling you you guys are half the schedule, half the cost, right? Amtrak really leaned into sophisticated project controls and started to find professionals that had estimating and scheduling background to then come in and help these teams figure out how to even execute these projects. I think that that type of contracting is good. Now, I don't think there's one solution that's worked really, really well. And you know this, there's no one solution that's right for every project. Every project is different. Every owner is different. Every site is different. So I do think that traditional design bid build does still have uses, but I think on the mega projects, in particular where you're looking for cost, schedule, certainty, and really better allocation of risk, finding ways to get the builders involved early, I think is a good thing. And people probably have had bad experiences, but I think people have had bad experiences with design bid build too.
Yep.
Right. But really it is, I think, constantly evolving sort of conversation. And we are always a little bit behind sort of the curve. So we need to look at our friends in Europe and in Australia, now even in Canada, and start to learn a bit from what they're doing and take the best of what they're doing and bring it over here. Which I think is happening more and more with the owners getting more sophisticated around this as well, which I find encouraging.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, you mentioned like contracts and risk. And one thing I really love, and this is from like my DBI training, but it's like risk should be given to the party best able to manage it,
Yeah.
right? It's not a like, oh, we're just gonna give you all of the risk, like here you go, contractor friend, here's your risk, and they're like, well, if you're gonna give me all the risk, I'm gonna price in all the risk. Like I
Yeah.
have no idea what to expect, right? And so like then it becomes this like it's not like the fiscal responsibility isn't there. And I do think like, it becomes difficult sometimes. Like, hey, we want to be collaborative, but contracts have to manage because we all are taking on some risk then, right? There's liability, there's exposure. But I agree. I think what you said that I really like, and I actually have this conversation a lot, is like, there's no one solution. So you really got to look at the project holistically and then identify, based on all the parameters you mentioned, right? Like location, size, type of work, available parties, right? Who's actually going to bid this work? Are they sophisticated enough to do a design build? Are they not? And
That's
uh,
not everyone is able, right? Or
yeah.
so that way. Yeah.
And then just the point on project controls, is we get more sophisticated. And this is actually going to lead me into my next question. It's like just surprisingly enough, but as we get more sophisticated with the project controls component, like we can do a better job controlling the schedule and controlling the budget and understanding in real time truly where we are. Sometimes like if you're getting, your progress update 2 weeks after the date that has been run, well, that's great information, but there's been another half of a month, on well, let's call it like a 36-month cycle. That's a long time that now I don't know where I'm at. Or, even with like cost and budgeting sometimes, right? Like, hey, well, we know what our spend to this date is, but I need to know my spend right now. Like I need to know it every minute, basically. Like I need to understand, are they progressing according to schedule? And so I guess the way it leads me to my next question is like, you talked a little bit about Amtrak and how they're doing some new cutting edge stuff. I'm sure AECOM is doing some cool stuff. What are you seeing in that? Like the data, the digital transformation, the special word AI or letters. But how
Yeah.
are you seeing them kind of change, like how you're bringing solutions to clients and delivering projects?
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, it is the term of the day, right?
Yeah.
AI. I mean, it used to be like, it was CAD and then it was 3D modeling and then it was BIM, right? So I think AI is gonna, those are all, I think major step changes.
Yep.
This is an exponential change that's gonna occur. I don't know what it's gonna look like, Eric. I do know that there's value in what AI can do, and I think it does apply to project controls. I think it can help sort of create more sophisticated dashboard, comb through information, find, potential future trajectories because you want to know where you're going, right?
Yeah.
It's not about where you were necessarily, but it's about using the data from that you're collecting with your plan that you're forecasting and then understand what is your probability of actually staying on schedule and budget. I think AI's got value in the project control space as well. Definitely, I think what the next frontier is going to be is AI for engineering. I think there's a lot of AI for like with large language models, but they're not really math and engineering models lately. I know that AECOM, we are definitely leaning into trying to understand how AI can help us deliver projects more effectively, looking at ways to reduce cost and schedule, and trying to find ways to do more, right? It's not about replacing people. It's about making people more efficient so that we can do more as an right? And, when I look at it, again, when I throw my, old owner's hat on, is every owner that you talk to, every owner that you work with has limited budgets,
Yep.
right? They have dollars that they need to spend wisely. But if we can find a way as an industry to leverage AI to do things more efficiently, if you can then help an owner do more with every dollar that they have, that's a massive, massive victory, right? Because it's not like MTA or Port Authority or Sound Transit or LA Metro is getting more money every year, right?
Yeah.
So if as an industry we can use AI to do things more effectively, that we can actually then stretch dollars to do more. That's what I see as the really big win for that. And it's coming. It's not a question. It is, right? It is coming. It's just a question of how are we going to sort of harness AI to help us do more? Because you can actually not only can you build, you can design more quickly eventually when these tools catch up. You can reduce project schedules for delivery, but you can also make projects more efficient, right? In terms of the way the projects are, the materials that are used, and also looking at helping it figure out sequence, right? So we're just, I think, at the beginning of what's coming on AI, in my opinion. But I know specifically here at AECOM, we are looking at it really, really closely because we see this as the next frontier for the industry.
And I agree with everything you said. And the one like thought I would kind of echo is it's not about replacing people. It is about making them more efficient, making them better at what they do, giving us all more consistency, right? Just across the board. But there is that big fear, right? That like, oh, well, if AI does what I do. And I think we're probably closer to the part where AI is a great tool that similar to like, let's use CAD as an example, right? You brought that up, right? I'm sure there were draftsmen that were like scared when CAD came out, like, oh no, like there's not going to be, but there is a need, right? It's a tool that supports us in what we do. And I just, I think it'll be a more dramatic change. You alluded to that too, but I think it will be a similar change. Like we will all just be better, more efficient. And to your point about just delivering more for every dollar our client has, it's almost our responsibility to do that, so
Yeah, these are
there's,
public dollars, right?
yeah. So, cool. I'm gonna like I just have one more concept thought here. So you also talked about your time with congestion pricing and getting involved with like the local politicians and kind of trying to help like be at the forefront of policy and regulation. Um, what's something in that realm you'd like to see either like changed or improved, like procurement or regulation or just contracting that you think could help like accelerate us as an industry or the rail transit or mega programs in general?
Yeah, I mean, everything takes a long time, right? And I think oftentimes regulations are put into place because something went wrong, right? I
Yes.
do think there's got to be more discipline on revisiting some of these laws and regulations that I know that a lot of people have consternation around NEPA and making that more efficient. I know there's a lot of people thinking about that. I know there's even conversations happening in Washington about that. What I learned, Eric, from congestion pricing, think about it. I mean, that was back in probably 2017. Congestion pricing just went live this year. right? So, that's a huge gap. You've seen the stories about all the different reviews that have to go through, and they went through that went through an expedited review. But then, went through all these challenges and legal challenges, still going to win legal challenges. But ultimately, congestion pricing, as controversial as it might be, it is good because it funds transit, right? I know it's not everyone feels that same way, but just selfishly from a transit professional, right? Trying to find opportunities to then help us right size our mobility scheme, right? Cars have a place, but so does transit, right? So does micromobility, scooters, things like that, right? So I think they it taught me a lot about how to have the conversations around why infrastructure and infrastructure funding is really important, right? And again, they don't teach you that in engineering school, that.
No.
So that's why I found that experience so valuable, and it was really interesting, to be honest with you. It was really interesting. So
No, I think that's great. And congestion pricing is an interesting one because, you talked about how some of like globally they're, we're picking and choosing what works. And that was something that globally has worked, right? In other major cities.
and we
I
looked at all those places, right?
Right. Yeah, I
From the
know. I
bloody
remember
'80s.
I don't know if you were part of the contingent, but I know there was like a contingent that flew to London and flew to Singapore and like, visited some of these other locations that
I was not, sadly, but
no,
Stockholm as well, if I remember right. Yes.
next time I'm sure they'll but that would be cool. Yeah, I think improvements like in regulation, speed, and like, but thinking outside the box is like what I heard from you there, and I think that's always a good way to approach things. So we're gonna come close to the lightning round. I wanted to, and I know you've given a bunch of good advice here. But I always like to sum up the show with like if you have like a quote or a mantra or some advice for the next generation of like leaders in our industry because we need them, right? We are losing talent and there's clearly a talent war. And that's another place where AI is not going to replace people. Hopefully it'll just help us bridge that talent gap. Right? Like maybe we can
That's true. That's a great point. Yeah,
make
I didn't
that
think of that
smaller.
actually. Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, any advice you have for the next generation of leaders?
It's funny, as we'll go through this conversation, I mean, what comes to my mind is say yes, right? There is so much in this industry that you can do. Like yeah, I've talked about the cool stuff. I've talked about the big dig, gesture price, talked about Trinabano and Second Avenue and stuff. But I did station inspections, right? I was a CAD operator for my first 6 months of my career. But all of that helped me understand and build a foundation of how do you work with everybody in this industry, right? Because no one builds a project on their own. So saying yes, seeing different parts of the industry, getting experience in all parts of field work, design work, you know, uh, management work, writing, getting involved in proposals at an early age, like gives you a real understanding of how this industry sort of works as a business, but also how engineering can then be moved into construction. I think that's really what I don't think, I'm trying to think, to never say no to an opportunity that came to me, especially back when I started. I don't think I did. And I think that may have been the best thing that I did. Because it also, when people needed stuff, they knew that I knew how to do it, right? Because I had done inspections, I had, done 3D CAD models, I had done, you know, underground and underground design, and that's how I got from the Big Dick to Trono then on to Second Avenue Subway. Like that to me is that gave me exposure to so much of what we do as an industry, but it also taught me how to collaborate with all sorts of different people. Because Eric, inspectors and folks in the field and people sitting at a desk designing all day and people in marketing all are different people. So I
Yep.
got a chance to understand how do I work and communicate with all these different people that I need to know how to do. I need to know how to work with, sorry, so I can actually be effective at my job and wherever my job takes me. And that to me, I just would be to say yes.
I love that advice. It's so good. And I think your story was so great because it wasn't just saying yes, but you were like creating the opportunities you wanted to say yes to, right? Like you put out into the
Eventually,
world, I want to be on Second Avenue Subway, and
yeah,
the world returned that by right finding that opportunity, or not for you, but like gave you that opportunity. And the same thing with that conversation you said with Mike, right?
yeah,
And probably in other instances here too, not all of them, but you were saying yes, but you were also creating those opportunities to say yes. And like that's probably harder for a lot of people to do. Um, And then the other thing you said, and you touched on it here at the end, and that's why I want to recap it, is like having different conversations with people is important. But the ability to have those conversations comes from all of that different perspective. You put yourself in maybe uncomfortable positions in roles you hadn't filled before, but you were willing to say, "Hey, I'm gonna like roll up my sleeves and I'm gonna learn this and I'm gonna try." And by all accounts, you were successful in all those ventures, and that's awesome. But that gave you the perspective to have those conversations. I like amazing advice just from hearing your story. And so with that, I'll take us into the lightning round. So these are rapid fire questions.
All right.
And you tell me, you could just, the answers are simple enough, but are you an early riser or a late night type of guy?
Early riser.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in bed by like 10 or
I think most of our industry is like, we're just so used. Do you have like a favorite high speed rail system anywhere in the world? Like that if you
I have to
could
say
like,
the next Genicella, I have to say, right?
yeah, okay, if you do.
No, so I will
Let's
tell
say
you when I come back from Spain, I may amend my answer
okay, all right,
because
cool.
we'll be on some high speed rail in Spain. So
I think one of the cool things, like, and this goes back to me being in college so long, and I also went to Columbia. You probably know that, but so it's but one of the things we looked at was from a high speed rail, and it was like I forget what they call it. It was like a time perspective map, and it was like, hey, like if New York to LA is a 6 hour flight, it's this far away, right? But if you could, and this was a bad analogy. They do it in France, right? But like if you could do it in high speed rail faster, they actually become this far away, because it all
right,
becomes about time perspective,
it
right?
is
It's not that far. If I can get there in 3 hours, it's 3 hours away, right? So it's just like I love the impact high speed rail could have in like major metropolitan areas.
absolutely.
I love flying because I go, if I'm going to travel somewhere, you kind of have to fly. But when I can, I take rail transit. I love rail
I'm the
transit.
same.
Easier to get on. I can work the whole time. There's no like planes have such stoppage, right? Like security stop.
Yes,
Okay. Like stand outside your gate, stop. Like wait for boarding, stop. Like I can't do fluid work for 2 hours because those 2 hours are all broken up by 30-minute increments. So
I feel the same way.
and last lightning round question. Favorite book, movie, concert. I like to leave it open, but give me a favorite something.
I mean, concert's easy, so
Oh,
it's Rush for me.
yeah?
Huge Rush fan. Excited they're coming back around. I got tickets for the 50th anniversary, 50 something anniversary show that are coming back next year. But yeah, that's a whole nother story, Eric. But I went to my Rush concert when I was in 8th grade, and to this day, I can't believe my mom let me go.
She
But
might not have known. Like, I know there are things that my parents probably just didn't know where I was. It's cool to go.
no, but yeah, that would be that was incredible experience.
That's awesome. And honestly, kudos to all of those. Like, that they're still performing at like a high level. They're like 70s. Like, and good God bless them. I don't know what they did, but with that, I will thank you for being on. This was an awesome conversation, a lot of fun, and your perspective is always so great, and I love hearing it.
Appreciate that. And
Um,
thank you for having me.
no, this was fantastic. Do you have any like final thoughts or closing word you want to share or anything you want
No,
to say?
just appreciation for the conversation. I think what you're doing is really important. I don't think people talk about infrastructure in this way enough, because it is important, but we need to do a better job advocating for ourselves and for our industry and our owners. So thank you for doing this.
I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun, and I learned so much, and I get inspired by the like, even this like after an episode, I always get like so amped up. I'm like, Jay says yes to everything. Like, what can I say yes to now today? Like, where can I create an opportunity that I didn't like think of earlier today? So that's gonna be the rest of my day. Just so you know.
Just ask your wife. That's all you have to remember.
She'll appreciate that. I'll tell her. All right. Well, with that, that's all the time we have for today. We'll include links to any resources we mentioned in the show notes. And thanks again for listening, everybody. Keep an eye out for our next episode.
This episode is brought to you by Infinite Consulting Corp, your go-to firm for MBE certified project and construction management consulting. Discover how Infinite can help you build a better future at infiniteconsultingcorp.com.